Weak men talk too much, not because they have more to say, but because they have something to prove. And that's where they lose. Because the more a man talks, the more he reveals his insecurity, his need for validation, his lack of control. And people feel that instantly, not logically, but instinctively. Watch any conversation carefully. A man starts speaking and doesn't stop. He explains everything in detail. He fills every silence. He keeps adding more, even when it's not needed. And it feels like confidence, but it's not. It's compensation. Because silence makes him uncomfortable. Silence feels like pressure. Silence feels like he might lose control of the interaction. So he fills it. With words, with explanations, with unnecessary energy. And in doing that, he gives everything away. Because the more you talk, the easier you are to read. People see what matters to you. They see what you're trying to prove. They see where you're unsure. And once they see that, they stop taking you seriously. That's the part most men never understand. Talking more does not increase your presence. It weakens it. Because presence is not built on volume. It's built on control. The ability to say less and mean more. Now compare two men. One speaks constantly, explains everything, fills every gap. The other speaks only when needed. Short, direct, controlled, and without doing anything extra. You already know who has more authority. Because authority doesn't chase attention. It doesn't need to fill space. It doesn't need to prove anything. It allows silence to exist. And that's where most men fail. They think silence is awkward. But silence is pressure. The kind of pressure that exposes who is in control. And the man who can sit in that silence, without rushing to break it, is the one who owns the interaction. That's the shift. Weak men talk to gain control. Strong men stay silent because they already have it. The problem is not that men talk. The problem is why they talk. Because most men don't speak from control. They speak from pressure. The pressure to be understood. The pressure to be respected. The pressure to not look weak. So they overcompensate. A man makes a point, then explains it again, then adds more, just to be sure, then repeats it in a different way. Not because it adds value, but because he needs it to land. That's the mistake. Because the moment you need your words to land, you lose power. Now your speaking is not controlled. It's dependent. Dependent on how people react. Dependent on whether they agree. Dependent on whether you feel heard. And that dependency is visible. People can feel when a man is trying to convince, trying to prove, trying to push his point through, and the more he tries, the less weight his words carry. Because strong words don't chase agreement. They stand on their own. Now look at the opposite. A man says something once and stops. No extra explanation, no repetition, no need to convince. And that silence after he speaks creates pressure, because now others have to respond. Others have to think. Others have to fill the space, and that flips the dynamic. Now he's not chasing the interaction. The interaction is moving toward him. That's control. But most men never reach that point. Because they're uncomfortable with silence. Silence feels like loss of control. Like something is missing. Like they need to fix it. So they jump in. They add more words, more energy, more explanation. And every time they do that, they lower their position. Because instead of holding the space, they are trying to fill it. And the man who tries to fill space is never in control of it. That's the deeper truth. Talking too much is not about communication. It's about discomfort. Discomfort with silence. Discomfort with uncertainty. discomfort with not knowing how you're being perceived. And until that discomfort is gone, nothing changes. Because you'll keep talking, not because it's needed, but because you feel like it is. And that feeling is exactly what gives you away. At a deeper level, this isn't about talking. It's about control over silence. Because the man who talks too much cannot handle it. He cannot sit in a moment where nothing is happening. He cannot stay still when there's tension. He cannot allow space without trying to fill it. And that lack of control exposes everything. Because silence is not empty. Silence is information. It shows who is comfortable and who is not. A man says something and immediately keeps going. Why? Because he feels the need to hold attention. He feels like if he stops, he loses something: respect, control, position. But the opposite is true. The moment you can't stop talking, you've already lost it. Because now your behavior is not intentional, it's reactive, driven by the need to maintain something, and anything you need to maintain owns you. That's why weak men talk, not to communicate, but to manage perception, to make sure they are understood, to make sure they are accepted, to make sure they don't look uncertain. And in doing that, they reveal uncertainty. That's the paradox. The more you try to control how people see you, the more obvious it becomes that you're not in control. Now look at a man who is different. He says something and stops. No rush to continue. No need to add more. No attempt to secure the moment. And that pause feels heavy, because now there is nothing else to read. No extra words, no additional signals, no visible need. Just stillness. And stillness creates presence. Because now people don't know exactly what's coming next. They can't predict you easily. They can't read you instantly. They can't control the direction of the interaction. And that creates tension, the kind of tension that pulls attention toward you. That's why less words create more weight. Because every word you remove removes noise. And what's left becomes sharper, more precise, more controlled. Now your words don't compete for attention, they command it. Because they are not followed by explanations, not diluted by repetition, not weakened by urgency. They stand alone. And when words can stand alone, so can the man behind them. That's the difference. Weak men use words to support themselves. Strong men don't need support. At the highest level, this is no longer about talking less. It's about not needing to talk more. Because that's where real control begins. The man who talks too much is always trying to maintain something. Attention, approval, position. And the moment you're trying to maintain something, you're already losing it. Because now your behavior depends on the reaction of others. If they listen, you continue. If they don't react, you add more. If they challenge you, you explain further. And in all of that, you are not leading. You are adjusting. That's the trap. Most men think talking gives them control over the interaction, but in reality, it puts them inside it. Now they're chasing responses, chasing understanding, chasing validation. And the more they chase, the more they lose. Because power is never with the man who is trying to be heard. It's with the man who doesn't need to be. That's the shift. The man who is in control doesn't feel the need to fill every silence. He doesn't feel the need to clarify everything. He doesn't feel the need to prove his point multiple times. He says what needs to be said and stops. And in that stop, there is confidence. Because stopping means you don't need anything back. No agreement, no reaction, no validation. And when you don't need anything back, you are no longer dependent on the interaction. That's where control returns. Now your words are not driven by pressure. They are chosen. Now your silence is not awkward. It's intentional. Now your presence is not built on noise. It's built on stability. And stability is what people respect. Because when a man is comfortable in silence, it shows something deeper. He is not trying to convince. He is not trying to impress. He is not trying to control how he's perceived. He is simply there, grounded, unmoved, and that creates weight. Because now people adjust to him. They listen more carefully. They speak more precisely. They think before interrupting. Not because he demanded it, but because his presence requires it. That's what most men never reach. They stay in the cycle, talking more, explaining more, trying more, and in doing that, they weaken everything they say. But the man who breaks that cycle, who removes the need to speak constantly, becomes something different. Not louder, not more aggressive, but more controlled. And in a world where most men are constantly trying to be heard, the one who doesn't need to speak becomes the one everyone listens to. Because in the end, weak men talk to gain power, but strong men already have it, and that's why they don't need to say much at all.